If you exploit people to build your wealth, you've lost your integrity to me.
What happens when a debt coach, a manifestation guide, and a socialist walk into a bar? It's no joke.
You can almost put them in a bit of a cage because there's a force outside of them that's restricting them.
I mean, what is empathy if no action is taken?
It's the start of a real conversation.
It's interesting I brought up sort of systemic issues. You immediately thought that reduces individual responsibility.
I think people definitely see manifestation that way.
What is it changing? How do you live differently to me now?
3 ways of seeing the world, 1 bar, and all the questions that connect us. Pull up a store and see who's walking into my bar. All right, so today we are asking the big question. Is money evil, or is it what we do with it that changes our lives? First of all, will you guys introduce yourself and tell me what you do?
I'm a manifestation guide, but I have a very science-based approach to that.
I'm a socialist, and I think capitalism is the real enemy.
I'm a debt coach, so I help people who are poor and in debt to get out of debt.
So growing up, I grew up in the church, and my gran grew up in the church. One of the scriptures that I always used to hear is that money is the root of all evil. She would always tell me this, right, if I ever spoke about money too much. So I want to know, is it money itself or the way we use the money?
I mean, for me, money is neutral. Money is just a resource. It's a neutral resource. But we as humans, we are like the force that you apply to money. Like what we bring to money changes its use. It can be then used in a negative way or a positive way. I don't think money's bad. I think it's completely neutral, and it's we as humans that determine its use.
Problem is the system of capitalism, the system that surrounds the money, not necessarily the money itself. There are problems with the way money is conceived in our modern age, but for me, the focus is more about the system around money of capitalism and the way we actually use that as people and as a society.
I side with, personally, that money is not in and of itself bad. However, our relationship with money, we need to be really careful. I think it's like something we shouldn't be relaxed about, you know?
So what kind of limits do you think we need to have with money? Or where do you think that limit is?
I think it shouldn't be filling up as much time or space in my heart or in my life as it probably does at the moment. I think that's probably a common issue that we can all relate with, you know?
I think also with that scripture, because I remember when it would be brought up a lot in church, and they always used to emphasize on the word love. So the love of money, not necessarily money is evil, but if you love money too much, then it's probably gonna push you to do something that you might not want to do because you just obsessed with it. And I think for me, that's always what's made me kind of know if I'm going too far, if I start feeling like I'm obsessed with making money and I need to make the money. Zac, what have you seen money and debt do to people's lives?
Yeah, I mean, I work with people who are in debt and in poverty. You know, you can look at how they spend their money and think, okay, that's probably not the wisest way to spend it. But I think it's a lack of education, it's abuse, and it's neglect. I think those are the common themes that I see that people have with their debt. So I work with people who are in desperate need of help. Right. And they're not just poor in money, but they're poor in hope and you know, this idea of is there anything beyond my circumstance, situation? Like desperate people.
One thing I want to focus on, I guess, is the sort of systemic problems, right? The way I see it is that some people are destined to fail within the system that we have. And that comes on a material sense, like some people are just born into low-income households that have certain pressures on them in a material sense that force them down the road of debt, for example. But there's also a sort of cultural phenomenon that we have of consumerism and individual consumerism. This idea that your job as an individual in society is to earn money, consume, and then earn money again to reconsume. And you enter this sort of consumer cycle that might lead people down the road of debt. And I guess a question that I might have for you, Zac, is how do you see the distinction between someone's individual responsibility and the responsibility of society in leading people down certain paths in life?
I get a bit hesitant with this kind of systemic chat because for me it feels like a lack of responsibility.
To who?
For us. individually. Now, I'm not saying that we have great systems. I'm not an advocate of necessarily the systems that we have and they're great, but I definitely side a bit more with we have responsibility to take control of our own lives, of whatever we do have, whatever you have, whether it's a little or a lot. Now, people are poor because of systemic things, but they're also poor because of individual lack of responsibility. And then they're also poor because of neglect and because of abuse and these terrible things that, that brings me to tears sometimes with my clients.
I think it's interesting that I brought up sort of systemic issues and you immediately thought that reduces individual responsibility. Although that I didn't necessarily say that, I just think both things happen in tandem, right?
Right.
Systemic pressures on individuals that lead them, that sort of set up their life circumstances to begin with, form the foundation of the paths that people will take in life. And these are things outside of their control. And I think we live in a culture that overemphasizes people's individual control over their circumstances. And it puts the blame on those people, right? We live in a supposed meritocracy.
Big word, what does that mean?
This idea that the people end up in the positions that they're in based on their merit. But when you have that sort of culture, what you're saying to the people at the bottom is that they also deserve to be there, right?
I see what you're saying, because what you tell people is really important.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're telling somebody that system is the problem, you can almost put them in a bit of a cage because they then don't think that they have ability to move and to be in a different circumstance because they think that there's a force outside of them that's restricting them.
But if that's the truth, then isn't that something we should consider? They can both be true. You can have individual responsibility within your circumstances, but you can also have systemic pressures that hinder your ability to live in life. Right?
Here's my question then. You have these opinions on how things should be run. Like, how does that impact how you live now? Like, what is it changing? How do you live differently to me now with that perspective?
I'm not sure how you live, to be fair, but I would say that the idea that I understand that systems impact people's lives allows me to move through the world with more empathy than I would if I didn't.
Are you giving your money out more?
The way I relate to people is with more empathy, right? Because when I look at someone's individual circumstances, I don't place the entirety of their responsibility of their situation directly on them. I know that it's a combination of systemic pressures as well as individual responsibility. So I think that forms the basis of increased empathy when you look at people and you deal with people.
I mean, what is empathy if no action is taken? This is not me casting judgment on you, but are you just saying, like, you're just less judgmental?
But I think emotions drive behaviours, right? So
but exactly,
if you're more empathetic,
behaviours changing.
Yeah, because feelings subconsciously create our behaviours. That's actually the science of our behaviour. So if you look at someone, I think I get what you're saying, that if you look at someone and you think the reason you're in your situation is your fault, and then if you can see nuance and see that, well, some of this is systemic, some of this is the environment that you were born into and the systems that are at place, you might feel then, actually, I feel empathy for you. I feel that some of what's been done to you is unfair, and then that will create an urge to act. So I do think emotions do matter because they create how we then respond.
I think two things can be true. I think, yes, sometimes it is down to the individual, but I think to say that systemic structures don't have an impact on how somebody lives their life or the outcome of their life, I don't think that's
that's not what I'm saying. Either. But what I'm saying is, like, it shouldn't take us away from responsibility. I appreciate I agree. I also work with clients who are in these systems and it's not helpful for them at all. So I get it. I guess it's more that I just think if we have these strong opinions, like, it should change how we live.
Well, if it can't change how we live, though. So if I know, like, black men are less likely to be employed than white men when they come out of uni, down to their names and stuff like that. So if I come out of uni and I've got a degree and I keep applying for jobs and I can't get that, then I'm trying, but the system is not allowing me to change. And I think that's where, like, it's a little bit difficult to just solely say that someone should just make a change, because I think there's loads of people that, would just like to make a change, but they literally can't. Do we think that someone can pursue wealth and still live a life of integrity. So a lot of people say, you know, you can't be a billionaire and still have integrity because you would have done too many things to get to that point. But do we think there is a space where you can be wealthy and still maintain your integrity?
But I absolutely do think that you can reach some level of wealth and be aspiring for some level of wealth without losing integrity, because again, it's a resource. So once you have that resource, how are you going to use that resource? I totally see the point that in society, there's probably a lot of people and a lot of us that don't set those limits. But there are also so many examples of people with wealth who use that wealth to create, you know, positive things in society.
In the abstracts, you can, but wealth is kind of a loaded term in our current society. And I think a lot of the ways that people discuss building wealth is exploitative. And if you exploit people to build your wealth, you haven't maintained your integrity. So that's where I would draw the line to your point about limits. I say the moment you exploit someone, you're not using money as a means to an end. You're using money as an end in and of itself. And you're happy to use people to build your wealth. You've lost your integrity to me.
For me, my own beliefs, you know, it's like, am I right before God? And I think that's the biggest, you know, thing in my life. Well, and I appreciate that's a weird thing to grasp, you know, if you're not familiar with that. But so for me, whether I have wealth or whether I have no money, you know, am I still right before God? And keeping my integrity, what I do, how I portray my life, how I do things every day, each week, each month, it's aligned to my value, more than value, but to Jesus and to God. And so how I use my money will always stay aligned to that.
Do you think that wealth is a blessing or it's more of like a mindset?
Yeah, I think it's something that you can absolutely create, as in you can change a situation with money. And I think that comes from mindset a lot of the time. I sit somewhere in the middle, and I don't see it as something like that's just handed to you out of nowhere, like, you know, like dropped into your hands when you ask for it to the universe. But I think my approach to manifestation is you set an intention, so I guess you ask for money. At the basis, to get money, you need to provide value of some sort.
Right.
Your job, any job that each of us have, we're providing some sort of value. But the nuance is, as you said, are you providing that value without exploiting someone?
I mean, money, like, I don't know, it just comes and goes, doesn't it? Like, one day you have, you know, X amount in your account, and the next, it's gone. Do
you think Christians should pray for money? So, like, I would say manifestation is kind of close to prayers I don't see there's that much difference apart from, I guess, manifestation is more of an energy thing, whereas prayers, you're praying directly to God. But, you know, like, if Christians would say, like, God, please provide me with this, and God, please provide me with a nice house, so do you think it's something that Christians should pray for?
Look, I've been in situations, in fact, I've even been in debt before, you know, and I was praying in those times, and I think it's dumb not to bring what's going on in your life. Like, you should bring that to God. Like, God is interested in that. He's interested in you and what's going on in your life. However, I don't expect to be, like, wealthy. Like, I definitely don't side with, you know, something that's called the prosperity gospel, if you've ever come across that. But it's this idea that, you know, pray for lots of money and you'll get lots of money. Some prayers are not answered like that, you know, and some prayers are answered differently than we would like.
Right.
And so I think it's okay. I think there's some prayers that you probably know yourself if you're praying, you'll be like, okay, I'm being a little bit naive, or not naive.
Of the flesh.
A little bit of the flesh, if you like. I know that lingo. I wasn't going to bring that lingo in, but
the flesh,
you brought it in.
And it is, it's very of the flesh, asking for loads of money.
Yeah, I mean, look, if it's for, like, a really good cause, you know, cool, pray for it, sure. But if you just want lots of money, you know, I think there's better things to pray for, maybe.
What do we think money does to people mentally, not just practically? I think it changes people's mindsets, how they look at life.
I think it kind of enhances what's already there to an extent. If you're somebody who doesn't feel good enough, but then if you get that money, you still need to prove yourself. It's not going to solve that. But at the same time, I think money doesn't necessarily change you. I don't think it's going to make you bad if you get money. Can you adjust? If you suddenly, say we're talking about you become a billionaire overnight, you win some kind of lotto or whatever, can you adjust to that lifestyle and the things that are going to come with it? Because even though I see money as a neutral resource, in our society we have a view on it. We've branded it a certain way.
Right.
And so the majority of people are going to see it as this brand. It's marketed a certain way. People are going to come maybe out of the woodwork. People are going to see you differently because of it. And then how can you handle that? But it's not the money that's changing you. It's how people react to you. It's how, the world responds to you. It's how your physical circumstances might change because of what you do with that money. All of those factors, I think, change you. I don't think it's the money.
Right. Do we think that money now equals human worth?
Capitalism, I think, is what creates the belief that your worth is tied to what you produce.
Right.
And money is the resource that we, as a society, measure essentially like what we produce.
Yeah.
So I think that's where this kind of connection comes between how we value ourselves and money. Like even how, we care so much about careers in our society. And
right.
That's the way that you show that you are successful. We talk about success mostly through a career lens. At least that's how I see it. I think that's linked.
So what is the measure then, if it's not money?
Integrity.
Do you think so?
Yeah. Human measure is your integrity, like what you believe in, how you treat other people. Yeah, I think money is important, and I think money can get you into certain places, but I know some bad people with money, and I don't think they're nice human beings. But like we're saying, I think because when people have a lot of money, then now you're this great person.
I see that as energy, the energy that you put out there, not tangibly with the form of money, but are you choosing to be empathetic? Are you choosing to be uplifting? Are you choosing to be honest? I guess a bit like integrity, but it can take lots of different forms.
Yeah.
What energy are you putting out there? Or are you choosing to be exploitative? Or are you choosing to be manipulative? Those are just different states that you can put your energy into.
I think the question that you pose, which is, if money is not the measure of people's worth, what should be the measure of people's worth?
Not that I think money is the measure, but...
No, and that's
I'm
absolutely...
joking.
The question of, what should we measure people by, I kind of reject the question. I don't think we should be measuring each other, right? I don't think we should measure people's worth by any metric. By virtue of being a human being, you have worth. And no human individual has more worth than someone else. The moment you introduce any metric, you're going to have people who have more worth and people with less worth. That's not a society that I think is fair.
Can I ask you this then? I kind of agree, but if we're not striving to sort of build a certain amount of money or a certain amount of worth and prove ourselves, what's the meaning of life? How do we find meaning?
I'm not equipped to answer the question of what the meaning of life is, but I think we can live a life that's in line with our humanity, right? As human beings, we are creative, we want to love, we want to move around, we want to explore different things. And crucially, the most important thing is that we want to connect with one another, try to lead.
So just simply connection?
Yeah, I mean, you say simply connection, but as if it's it's not that deep, but it's...
Yeah, well,
it's...
I guess I need more. Is it just connection is we're connecting now. So, is this it?
Yeah.
But do you know what I mean? As in
Everyone has a different set of values, and there'll be crossover, but there'll also be difference. So the reason I'm saying this is because I do think about a world maybe post-money and post-careers, with AI and stuff. Maybe we won't work, and then what will we do to find meaning? And I think we'll still have to find ways to fulfill our values. And if we're doing life in a way that's working for us now, I think all of us will be fulfilling our values, hopefully through our jobs, as well as just doing them to earn money.
I don't think you need to look for a replacement necessarily to know that measuring people by money or measuring people by any metric isn't right.
Yeah.
We can accept that what we're currently doing is not correct, even before we find an alternative route. I don't think we should be scared to shed the current meaning that society gives us before we put on some other cloak, right? Trying to find some other meaning prematurely is how we just pick up another crutch. We drop the money thing, but then it might be something else that we pick up to find meaning in our lives. I don't think we should be scared to live a life that doesn't have a very easy, defined meaning and a path.
I wanted to know why people turn to things like gambling, because some people see it as a shortcut, to get to where they want to get to. How would you say that's different from manifestation?
No, I definitely agree. I think people definitely see manifestation that way sometimes, and I think that's a big misconception of, I'm sure that some people even market it that way.
Right.
That's not how I see it at all. So I think people seeking gambling or the lottery to get rich overnight and seeking manifestation, it's the same thing, it's just a different tool. and it comes from a deeper place, as you said.
So is manifestation, like I'm not like as clued up with this sort of kind of language, but is it simply a mindset or?
Not for me. For me, manifestation is about mind, body, strategy. But I think the word means different things to different people, because I use neuroscience and use physiology, but other people do use it to say, if you want this, ask for it and you'll have it in your hand straight away. And I think that's where the misconception comes in.
Right.
It's mindset, because mind creates behaviour. And I think that's what people don't understand, is that our beliefs, deeply ingrained, as you say, a lot of them come from childhood. They're not chosen. They influence the way that we behave, because our brain is instructed by our beliefs to then take action. And the actions that we take obviously create physical things like money, how much we earn, etc.
What do you think society would look like if money wasn't the measure of success?
I think if we could reorganize society, I would basically try to change some of those narratives that we spoke about. This idea that the people who have the most money deserve it, and the people who don't have that money also deserve it because of some sort of moral flaw or some sort of individual responsibility that they have not taken. So certainly the first thing I would change is the narrative. And I think if we didn't use money as a measure for people, I think we'd see a culture that would treat people with more dignity and more empathy, because you no longer think that someone doesn't have a home or a roof over their head because they deserve it. Or you would see it more as a product of misfortune and a product of systemic pressures that have led that person to those unfortunate conditions. So I think the crucial narrative shift would happen if we took money out of the valuation of human beings. And I think it does touch on your point, Leila, that mind does control actions, right? And when you change that narrative, you can make real-world changes and people's behaviour can change.
So what do we think a society would look like that's more, like, morally and spiritually centred?
Starting by changing the way people measure, the way we measure people, the way we value people, that changes people's self-esteem. But also in a material sense, I think we can change the way we organise these systems. We can make it so that people have the bare minimum that they need to survive, right? We need shelter, we need food, we need utilities. These are not things that should be privatised and used for profit. The moment people are trying to extract profit out of something that comes out of the ground, this is water, bro. Like, we all have a right to water. But there are capitalists that have taken that utility and are trying to profit out of that. And I think when we reorganise society to ensure that these systems are a lot fairer, culture can change.
I think to change a system, we also have to change narratives, because systems thrive off of narratives. So like a shift, as we said, from money being how we value ourselves, we have to create a narrative shift around that.
And what would that narrative look like to you?
I do think it's about meaning that we give ourselves in life, the way we act, the energy we put out, and more of a sort of, I guess it's a softer approach to how we see the meaning of life.
Do you think that without capitalism, people wouldn't be so competitive, you know, they wouldn't want to accumulate so much?
I would separate probably the competition and the accumulation. I think accumulation is definitely a mechanism of capitalism. And the level of accumulation that we see in today's society, in the form of billionaires, in the form of companies that are hoarding massive amounts of wealth that aren't circulated for people's well-being, that is definitely evil. That is not in line with humanity for me. But I think competition isn't necessarily all that bad. I think when you compare yourself to other people and you compete, that's fine. But it's just the way we do it in today's society which leads people to modify their lives and their behaviours, almost to sort of see someone else as a character to play against, right? You're in a first-player game, you're detached from your community and detached from connection with others. And it's about winning the game. And other people are just, they're just characters to beat, right? And I think when we see it in that form, competition becomes bad. But some level of natural competition and comparison is part of human nature.
So what do you think, what does healthy competition look like?
I think healthy competition looks like learning from other people, right? When a lot of the way we learn is by comparing other people's experiences. So I'm sat here and I'm speaking to Zac and I'm speaking to Leela, listening to their experiences, comparing my life to theirs is a natural thing I'm gonna do, right? And in that difference of human experience and opinion, I can learn and develop as an individual.
Well, guys, it's come to the end of the conversation.
Wowzers.
Head is like,
It was a good chat.
Good chat.
I'm thinking a lot.
Did you enjoy it? I'm glad
enjoy that.
everyone that comes into my bar, they always love a good chat, I'm telling you. So
Good
thanks.
bar, really good bar.
Thank you. Did you enjoy the drinks as well?
Really good drinks.
Okay, so join me next time to see who is walking into my bar. And if you want to join the conversation, then you can like, subscribe to the 48 YouTube channel so you don't miss who's coming in next.